Good morning, everybody. Hey, we are on Greece now, and I want to talk a little bit about Sparta and Athens, but more particularly Athens today. So as we cover these questions, I'm going to cover some of the notes as well. So here we go. So for these lecture slash learning target questions here, the first one, political question. Explain Athens and Sparta's political system and how slavery and the role that the lower classes of slavery played in the development of these very different political systems. Um, all right, so Athens was a democracy, but it's going to take some time to get there. It wasn't always a democracy. So, but they believed in education, personal rights, laws, and a civil society, much like the society of today. Sparta, on the other hand, was a monarchy or an oligarchy, and as a society, they believed in collective responsibility. The idea that, you know, everybody had to serve for the good of the state. You know, everybody had to go into the military. You didn't have an option of what you wanted to do. All right. Um, you were going in, and there were no social classes. The accumulation of personal wealth was looked down upon, and so with two totally different societies. In Athens, we mirrored us very closely. Now, the issue of slavery. This is key for both. Athens, slavery was one of the main reasons that democracy came to be adopted during this period, and I want to talk about that right now. So, and to get there, I think we have to take a look at Greek society in general. First off, uh, when you look at the Greek terrain, all right, it is going to shape their lifestyle. We talked in class about how, um, because of the mountainous, kind of rocky uh, outline of the terrain, that, you know, they developed into their city states, and each city state developed uniquely over time. But as far as farming goes, you don't have a whole lot of flat land to grow a bunch of crops, and so most of their crops were either grown on vines or in trees: olives, tomatoes, grapes, lemons, a lot of what you think of Mediterranean food as containing. So they had to result in go to like step farming, to where they actually cut into the mountain ledges that they could plant wheat and barley and that kind of stuff on. But because of land being so precious, it directly related to how they developed their social classes. And in the beginning, before democracy was there, you had four social classes. You had the hippies, who were the wealthy horse owners. And the reason why hippies means horse owner and it equated to being wealthy was that if you didn't have a whole lot of land, then you uh, didn't have a whole lot of land to raise horses. And so if you had enough land that you could sit and uh, grow crops and also raise horses on, then you had a ton of money. All right. So they were 2% of the population, and they owned 90% of the land. Um, which again is kind of what we're hearing across all societies, you know, eh, even coming up to today. But so then you had a kind of like a middle class, but it wasn't really a middle class. It was a tough lower class, and they were called the hectomora, and they were 1/6 partners, and they would go and they would work for the wealthy on their land, and the wealthy would give them, a certain allotment of land, and then they would have to go and farm it, and then whatever they grew, they got to keep 1/6 of it. So if I was wealthy and I gave one of you guys land, I would say grow all the food you can on this land, and then what'll happen is at the end of the day, I need you to grow and give me all of this food that has been shaded. You can keep that. That is yours. And so it wasn't a lot. And so what happened continuously was that if something went wrong, maybe a bad harvest, maybe I got hurt, whatever, and I didn't grow enough, then I went into debt because I had to go to that wealthy person and ask for money. And this was a very common problem in early Greece. And so what happened as a result of it was that when they went into debt, they went into slavery. When they weren't able to pay their loans back to the Hippes, they went into slavery and they were sold. Their families were sold, they were sold, and it became to be a very, 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 very big problem in Greece, in Athens. So, and then finally you had the Zeugate, and they were just the poor, lower class. They worked on the farms for the Hippes, but they were never given plots of land. All right. Um, so now, um, let's go to the development of democracy here. And so what was happening is you could see that the rich were screwing over the poor. All right, the poor became upset and started to demand change. And the nobles, they abused their power. They kept putting 1/6 partners, the hectomore, into slavery and mistreating them. And so you have this rise of tyranny. And now, if I say to you, a tyrant, is a tyrant a good person or a bad person? And normally today, our modern day definition of a tyrant is someone who's, nasty, who's a jerk to the people. Um, but in ancient Greece, where the word originates, in the beginning, it meant somebody who represented and fought for the poor. And so the first guy to try this was Chilon. And he went to Athens, and he had these followers, and they went up on top of the Acropolis before the Parthenon and everything was there. They went up to the Acropolis, and they took the Acropolis, and they said, we want reform. We're not coming down until we get reform. And you make some changes to help out the poor. Well, Megacles was the eponymous, or the king, at Athens at the time. All right? And his family was very, very wealthy. And everything was based on blood at this time. And his bloodline was as good as you could get. So Megacles went to Chilon, who's up top taking the Acropolis. He's got all these poor people with him. And he says, hey, just come on down. We'll make a deal. Just bring your people off the thing and we'll talk. And Chilon says, as long as my people are safe, we'll come down. He says, oh, yeah, Megacles, no problem. Well, he goes back on his word, and so as all these people are walking through the city of Athens, Megacles orders the army to pretty much slaughter all of them. And for the most part, puts a kind of what they call ma'emsa on the family bloodline. And when we get to Pericles, the great Athenian leader, he's going to die in a not-so-lucky way, and he is also of Megacles' bloodline. And so, they say that some of this is passed down onto him by Megacles. Sweet name, by the way, isn't it? All right, so we move forward. Then there's this guy named Draco. And it means Draco in Greek means the snake. And he came up with a law code. And it helped out the poor as always. But the one thing that's unique about the draconian law code, not the fact that it was very harsh punishments and all that. And sometimes you'll hear draconian used with like really mean, nasty kind of punishments and that today. But the thing that really made his law code unique was that it was the first to separate the severity of a crime. Before you steal a loaf of bread, you cut your arm off. Well, crime didn't really fit the punishment didn't really fit the crime. And so now you see, well, maybe stealing a loaf of bread isn't the same as stealing $2 million. So we have to punish them accordingly. So it does help out the poor, though, because at least now the rich have to be honest and they're treated the same way in court. Then comes Solon. And Solon was the guy that I wanted to name my son after, but my wife didn't allow me to. She said that just not really the right name. But the one thing with Solon is that he is the first successful tyrant in Athens. And he does this program of Sayakatia, and it's the shaking off of the burdens. And he frees all of those people that have been, all those Greeks that have been sold into slavery because of debt. He goes back and he actually pays for their release. He buys their freedom. And this is huge for the Greeks. So, goes around the Mediterranean, all those that have been sold outside. And so it was really, really a big thing. He abolished the hectomore, so no more 1/6 partner, and said, that is what our big problem is. Passed laws to protect them. And then finally, rather than base social classes on blood, he based them on wealth. Excuse me. And so now you had 4 social classes. 500 bushelmen. The hippies were now 5 to 300 bushels, or the equivalent of what it would cost for those. The zugate, and then the thetes. They were all other citizens. But the important thing is that they were all citizens. All right. And he also created a new legislative council, the Haleia, and anyone could be a part of it. All right. So a very huge part for Greek development, and you can see that that's why slavery played such a huge part. Cleisthenes here is going to take over, but we'll get to him in a little bit. So let's go back to here. That's not it. Let's go to there. So that was the idea of slavery and how it impacted Athens. Athens' lasting political influence on the world today, like we mentioned, without a doubt, it is democracy. All right, the idea of voting, legislative councils, trial by juries, law codes, equal representation for all social classes in front of the law is huge. Athens and Sparta is very different economic systems. Now, as we talk about, Athens' economic system was very much like our own in the sense that people could own their own business, or people received payment for their labor in whatever they chose to do, right? Toward Sparta,
the following students please come to the main office. Sam Seltzer, Megan Oden, and Samuel Seltzer to the main office. Thank you.
Awkward if you could hear that. But anyways, and Sparta, on the other hand, was very much different. They really didn't have a wealth system put into place. It was essentially grow what we need to survive and trade a little bit, but they didn't care about money. And everybody was pretty much told what they were going to do from the start. So very, very different places. Finally, the fourth one, a social question, explain how the political and social systems in Athens helped to protect the poorer classes of the people. All right. And so now I'm going to stop here for the time of it, and I'll come back to this question as well as some other things in our next session. Thanks so much. Talk to you guys.